I am absolutely delighted to be here with this panel to talk about this topic. We have an exciting group. I want to introduce them to you. We'll start with Anthony Suhu. Anthony is a venture advisor at the AI Fund, a board member at both Civio.ai and Spryker, a former executive vice president at a little startup called Walmart, and a former entrepreneur in residence at Harvard Business School. Anthony, welcome. Is there anything else the audience ought to know about you?
No, I think that's a pretty good background. The only thing I would maybe add to that is I have been with AI for the last 10 years, and first as an entrepreneur trying to figure out how to use it to build new products, and then over the last few years at Walmart, and now at AI Fund. So it's an exciting time to see how things have evolved.
Wonderful. Second on our panel is Caroline Say. Caroline is a board member at Coca-Cola and Morningstar, a couple of powerhouse boards there. She also has a distinguished career at Hewlett-Packard, IBM, and Yahoo. So Caroline, what else we need to know?
Thanks so much, Patrick. I would say my AI, or machine learning specifically, journey started back at Yahoo and search, right? Focused on NLP, entity extraction, recommender systems as it relates to personalization and content. And then more recently with my own company, we're entirely focused on machine learning-led decisions for cloud optimization in the SaaS space and cloud space. So excited to be talking about this topic.
So great to have you here, Caroline. Third on our panel, we have Kumar, who is the founder and president of GHD Digital, which, as Lisa said, is today's sponsor. Thank you so much, Kumar. Kumar is also a certified director for NACD, formerly the founder and CEO of Technova, a former managing partner at KPMG. Fantastic to have you here, Kumar. I'm sure you've got more in your background. What can you share with us?
Thank you, Patrick. We are very excited about this forum, and we've been working on AI for the last 5 years. I have 200 data scientists, and 50 of them focus on this particular topic. So we are absolutely delighted to share some of our views on this forum.
Good. And you're coming to us from Australia today, is that right?
Yes, it's nice and early 1 a.m. in Sydney, Australia, and very happy to be on the call at 1 a.m. in the morning.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Patrick Houston. I'm a retired Army general. I'm a lawyer in San Francisco. I'm a general counsel of a venture capital fund, Charles and Potomac Capital, and a public company, Ondas Holdings. I'm also on the FBI's AI task force and a board member at Quantum Shield. It's a private cybersecurity company. And let's dive into this. I know there is a lot of talk about AI out there, especially generative AI, but not much of it is focused at the strategic board level. What is it that board members, directors need to know and do in this space? That's why I'm so excited to have this group here to talk to us about that particular perspective. Kumar, I want to start with you. Can you share some insights about how generative AI is just transforming the industries and what sets board leaders apart who can leverage these technologies?
Sure, Patrick. We've done some research in this topic, like some of the other organizations, and are absolutely convinced that we have a compelling opportunity for every organization to develop products and enhance their services to their customers. We believe that in the next decade or so, AI-enabled advancements could add up to 5 to 6% increase in global GDP, creating a significant economic benefit from this technology. We already know a lot of venture capital firms are investing billions of dollars, and in our own industries that we support, we represent architecture, engineering, and construction industry, which is globally a true $1 trillion industry. And related to that industry is the energy sector, utilities and others. So we see a huge use of AI. We also see that in urban planning and landscaping, huge increase of use of AI. 9 out of 10 executives who we have spoken to at senior levels believe that generative AI is going to impact and disrupt their business. And board leaders are equally interested in understanding how to leverage this for a strategic benefit, because as you know, the board director's responsibility is not only to provide risk oversight, but also help in strategy formulation. So it's a very exciting space. It's the new wave of technology evolution, and we believe that it's going to be very beneficial for the humanity if it is used responsibly.
Wonderful. I'll just say that as board members, I think we all appreciate the ability to learn from others' successes and, frankly, some mistakes. So I'd like to turn to Anthony, but I also am going to turn back to you, Kumar and Caroline, to share your thoughts on this. What are you seeing out there, Anthony, and some examples of perhaps successes or even failures when people are leveraging generative AI that we might be able to learn from?
Yeah, I think it's actually a really good time to reflect on what's happened, because we're at a place in time right now that over the last 2 years, a lot of companies have really started focusing on AI projects, and we're starting to see some projects of things that have been successful or unsuccessful. Maybe to protect the innocent potentially, on the unsuccessful outcomes, what I would say is, in my observation, kind of studying a lot of these companies and talking to their boards and executives, there seems to be three overarching themes about unsuccessful outcomes for AI, or not getting the full benefits from it. One is a lack of engagement from the top, organizations still operating in silos, and then third is common trait thinking about the fact that AI projects are start and stop, kind of time-bound projects. And I can go into a little bit more detail if people are interested. But it's also a time where we have an opportunity to see success stories and example cases of companies that are leading the charge. And I think that, I don't know, for those of you that have seen the announcement from Andy Jassy as an example, but I'll share 3 examples for you that are really exciting about what we're seeing in terms of success stories, which is Andy Jassy, the CEO from Amazon, actually shared on LinkedIn of all places last week about how Amazon is using or leveraging GenAI to automate the process of software updates. For those of you that know about how software development works, software developers love building new code, love building new features. Really, the idea of maintenance is a critical thing of updating software, but it's something they feel is tedious and doesn't really, push a bar along in terms of driving customer experience. So the company's really focused on how do you automate that portion of software development. And what they found was they were able to cut upgrade time from 50 developer days to just a few hours. In terms of their estimate, how much it's impacted organization, I think they've said, the numbers sound crazy, but 4,500 developer years is what they've seen. And in the last 6 months, they've seen that over 50% of their Java systems were upgraded, with 79% of code that required no changes. So that means it was taken from their tool without a software developer having to actually upgrade or touch it, which is astronomical. Now, I know Amazon is one of those companies that is at the forefront of AI, but I think it does speak to what's possible, which is exciting. The other area, I think, company I do want to cite is maybe JP Morgan. Jamie Dimon's talked a lot about leveraging AI. What they're doing this year, I think, is exciting, where they're asking all new hires are going through what they call AI prompt engineering training, just like they used to have analyst training for new investment bankers. All employees, from what they said at JP Morgan Chase, is going to go through AI prompt engineering, which I think that they are going to see as one of those areas that helps them with critical thinking, as well as producing hopefully more efficiency, which is what they're assuming. They have said that they've seen a lot of productivity in terms of the app they launched called Chat CFO, where they're using their employee base, instead of kind of pecking and trying to find the right information, they're using this large language model to really build experts in their own customized large language model. There's some stats about JP Morgan I can go into a little later, but it's interesting the assets they have there. And then maybe finally on Caterpillar, the big industrial equipment company, they're really building products to leverage AI for worker safety, you know, things, equipment they use for mining and other areas in that space can be a dangerous role, and they have found opportunities to leverage AI to increase worker safety for themselves as well as their customers. So, you know, pretty broad cases. I can go on and on based on all the companies I've talked to, but I think it's a really exciting time to look at what's happening, what this technology can do moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. Caroline, Kumar, any examples you want to share at this point?
Yeah, I'll bring up a couple later on in the talk, but I think a fun one, so it's not clear whether it was successful or unsuccessful, but a fun one that I'll just bring up is something that Coke had done late last year to help consumers get a feel or take what the year 2000 or 3000 would be like. So they set out a marketing campaign that was co-created with AI to determine a recipe for Coke Zero in the year 3000. So something fun to reach out to consumers and engage with them.
Patrick, we are looking at using generative AI to increase safety on various construction sites. And we're also looking at using generative AI tools to improve the way we respond to large tenders. There's a significant increase in effectiveness and decrease in labor.
Well, I will add in as well one success, quick success and failure story. I've been using a generative AI legal assistant tool, and it's from a company called Ironclad that's been super impressive, really helpful. And for me, it's helped me not only increase the output that I have, but the quality of it as well. So I've been impressed with that one. On the failure side, I know a lot of companies are switching to chatbot and generative AI customer service representatives. I think we have all been caught at one time or another in the customer service hell that is a chatbot that you just can't get the answer and you can't get out of it. I think we as board oversight have to not only monitor these as ideas, but the implementation to make sure that they're actually panning out the way we hoped that they would and actually providing our customers the service that we want it to provide to them. So with that, I'm going to switch another question back. This one directed primarily at you, Caroline, but please, Kumar and Anthony, weigh in if you want. From your experience, have you seen boards that have effectively aligned AI strategy with their overarching business goals? So you know, we're talking here at the strategic board level. What you're seeing, Caroline?
Yeah. So I would say the conversations are pretty early, but there are two ongoing topics that I've seen with the boards I'm on as it relates to integrating AI into the overall business strategy. This happens at the full board level, as well as in committees like audit. So, you know, this discussion can happen in several different places. But the first ongoing topic is a discussion and a review of the opportunities for the business. So there are kind of three main questions that rise to the top when talking about this, which is how is AI leveraged in the company's products and services? So for example, at Morningstar, there's so much power in its research and insights that clients want or customers of theirs want. So they've effectively created an intelligent engine, which is leveraged by their clients. Or it is something that can be fine-tuned as a model to be used within the content and knowledge base of their customers as well. A second question that comes up as part of that discussion is how is AI improving employee productivity, right? So Anthony brought up a prime example using like Microsoft GitHub to help engineers be able to code more efficiently and effectively. You know, how is AI improving operational excellence? Right, so are we enabling Zoom, an AI companion, right, for example, to help with team productivity? Another example of that too is Coke partnering with its largest marketing agency, working with NVIDIA most recently. So an announcement just came out about 2 weeks ago where Coke, you know, as you can imagine, spends weeks to months localizing marketing campaigns, bringing in nuances to 200 plus markets. Right, that is a lot of manpower, a lot of manual effort, a lot of marketers and creative agency resources to make that happen. But with NVIDIA's technology now, they can do it in a matter of hours, if not days. So very powerful technology where you can improve operational excellence. And then I would say the second ongoing topic that I've heard across our boards is, who is really responsible for AI in the organization? And is there governance and oversight across the management team and the BUs or product teams for this? Because you've got to answer questions like, how do we make AI more responsible? Do we have high quality data that mitigates bias? And this is really not to gate the business from delivering AI solutions. It's really to bring the tech teams, the procurement teams, and the legal teams together to provide guidance or advice when it comes to implementing AI across their organizations. So those are kind of the two main topics that come up with my boards.
Wonderful. Anthony, Kumar, anything to share on that? I will just add in that you hit on so many such highly relevant topics, Caroline, and that tension between the productivity and the potential privacy concerns out there, all going to the point you made of responsible AI. I think it's so important.
Maybe one thing to add, Patrick, is that I think the important point is providing framework for guidelines. I think Caroline said it really well. You don't want to put too much constraint before you understand all the innovation, but you want to make sure everything's safe. And I think that that's the fine balance that boards, and I think just leadership are grappling with right now, is how much do you innovate before you really understand what this can do.
Yeah. So Kumar, how, from your perspective, can organizations just capitalize on the power of this generative AI tool, this incredibly transformative technology that we have out there?
Yes, Patrick, and this technology is evolving as we speak on a daily basis. And in your own part of the world, in Silicon Valley, the startup ecosystem has exploded, and the amount of investment getting into the startup ecosystem has skyrocketed. Most of the organizations are following a standard framework to capitalize on this transformational potential. And obviously, they're investing in skilled talent, hiring people who are skilled in this space, identifying high impact use cases. They're working very hard on their culture to foster an experimentation mindset. And very importantly, data readiness is becoming a priority. So when we are seeing AI being experimented and integrated, there are some clear pillars for success that we are observing in organizations who are able to use. And other than the use cases that I spoke to you about, and others have discussed, we have committed business users, business owners, strong sponsorship. Again, I mentioned culture and data governance. So those are some of the areas for adoption. People are talking about new roles like chief AI officer. We are not seeing that a lot. It's a trend that that's taking place, but we are not seeing too many chief AI officers yet. But the primary focus on data has significantly increased in the last 12 to 24 months, because if the data governance is not right, that AI tools will not be right either. So there's a lot of focus on getting data right and then strategically experimenting. So we're still in very much experimentation phase. And in the next 12, 24 months, we'll have more mature use. But the cases for hallucination are coming down at a rapid pace as the data improves.
No doubt, incredibly exciting time. Anthony, I want to go back to something you said. I had not heard that JP Morgan Chase was doing this prompt engineering training for all of its new employees. It's such an important professional skill now in this emerging technology. I'm so glad to hear that. And I suspect that that might be a kind of a wave of the future because it's such a critical skill that we all need to master. On that, are there any other steps for creating a culture where humans and AI can operate more effectively or efficiently?
Yeah, I would say the mindset right now that organizations, especially boards and the CEO needs to really think about is how do they bring their human workforce along to answer the question of what does the future of work really look like? I would kind of frame that up into kind of 5 different areas of consideration. One is to highlight what AI and human collaboration really looks like. How do they work together? And I think the JP Morgan example, we're going to learn a lot as we understand that as humans start taking away, maybe AI starts taking away some of the tedious work, how much more productive and what kind of advancements going to happen in terms of productivity from the workers. The second one is obviously to create more transparency and communication, to create buy-in within workforce about how AI systems operate, the data they will be using, the decision-making process, and really to encourage feedback and create and address any concerns that are appropriate. Third, I think it's really important for organizations to understand that this is not one of those things that you learn once and you stop. It's really, we need to promote a culture of continuous learning, just because as you advance and you learn what to do with AI, there's going to be other things it's going to unlock for the organization. And then fourth, providing some level of reskilling in your organization to promote, what we did before and really rethink how work gets done, and but provide training for workforces or individuals that might be impacted. And then the last one is really to establish ethical guidelines, not just to say this is what we will do, not do, but really provide some level of framework so that as workers are starting to use this new technology, this powerful technology, they can understand where the boundaries are.
Great list there to checklist for us to work off of. Caroline, I'm going to come back primarily to you, but also to Kumar and Anthony if they have any input on this subject. I think all of us in the audience are familiar with the traditional rule for directors' relationships with management, this nose in but fingers out role, and trying to apply that in the setting of AI. Like, what are the roadblocks from the board perspective to kind of figure out what management is doing in this regard? What questions can boards be asking of the management team without crossing that line inappropriately?
Yeah, I think what Anthony shared is a really great segue. There was this interesting Fortune article that came out recently where Workday was involved. They had done a study across bosses and leadership versus employees inside of their organizations. And they found that bosses and CEOs were far more optimistic about productivity gains from their employees than compared to their employees. And why is that, right? So the idea of what the real productivity gains from AI is, when you kind of dig in, is our employees set up to focus beyond the work of working? Do they have the skill sets? Do they know, is the organization and leadership upskilling them, helping with that, with new projects and innovation in other areas besides just kind of filling up the time? So I think that's a big set of questions to ask is, are we doing that as an organization to ensure that employees can be productivity when AI may be taking care of some of their work or maybe more of the mundane tasks? There are many, I think, roadblocks, but just to kind of distill that down into 3 to keep it less overwhelming. There are others like, what are the actual use cases or problems that we're solving in the next 1 to say 3 years? And how are we going to fund that? Right? I think there are lots of choices of developing from scratch or fine-tuning what exists out there, or leveraging a lot of open source frameworks or other bodies of work that companies have offered. The second is what I alluded to earlier is, again, who is responsible for AI in the organization? And that doesn't necessarily mean one leader. It could be a collective team that makes up an AI review or kind of committee, right, within the company. And then I would say another question to ask the leadership is, what are the safeguards around that question of responsible AI? What are the security, the privacy practices? Do we have high quality data and representative data when we are building out AI solutions? So those are, I would say, the four that would be important to ask leadership.
No, I think that's really good guidance. And I would say that here in Northern California in particular, we have a higher percentage of startups, at least smaller tech companies. So, if you go to the Microsofts of the world, not only do they have an AI team and an AI director, they have sub-elements of responsible AI directors and management teams in these sub-elements. But at the startup level, you have people who are multi-hatted. And as you go through the startup growth process, people are all over the map. So I think it's important for us as board members to be able to chart kind of a growth course for that management team as they evolve and build themselves up into someday a public company or at least part of a larger team. Obviously, Kumar, Anthony, jump in if you have any input here. I've got another question, though, for Anthony, if you don't have any input on that question, is, Anthony, how should boards set and maybe evaluate metrics? We want to measure our success or failure some way. How do we know if we're getting this right? Are there any decent metrics out there in this context?
Well, I think a lot of this first, I would say to add in the last point what Carolyn said, and then I'll bring it back to the metrics, is that it's really important for the board as well as the executive team to treat this the same way they would study their digital transformation, which is that a large majority of why digital transformation sometimes are not successful inside an organization is because there's not enough engagement at the top, where maybe the projects have been handed down to a director or a VP of transformation, and then that's left to that person to be the evangelist inside the organization. I think as a byproduct, it ties into how the board should really think about metrics and the questions. I think that the idea of asking about AI initiatives should be brought up probably in discussions in every meeting. And I would kind of break up in terms of how to think about the metrics in a few ways. One is to make sure the AI initiatives align with the business goals and with measurable outcomes. It could be revenue growth, it could be cost savings, but I would probably focus on not more than three key kind of KPIs if you're going to track any of these, just because it's easy to follow and it's going to be something you do not want to change. It's really important. I think, as I mentioned earlier, talking about these as a discussion point in every board meeting is really going to be important. The other area I would focus on is to set metrics for ethical standards and regulation, making sure that there's some grounding on checking about especially biases. I know we all know that this technology is only as good as the input that goes in. So asking that question since this is quickly evolving, as the large language models and this technology is getting smarter, is it creating new types of biases? And I think that's something to monitor as an organization every 3 to 6 months. I would also look at how the employee base, as well as how customers are adopting AI. So I would look at user engagement, very similar to how maybe you would look at from a media perspective, engagement rates, things like repeat engagement, how often your employees are pulling up the apps, how many questions are they asking, is that increasing or decreasing? Sometimes if it's decreasing, it's because they're finding the answer, but are they asking different types of questions? Are the strings in their context of their prompts getting longer? And then I think, again, taking that lesson of continuous improvement, I think it's important to take the mindset that when you think about transformation, I would akin this to the internet. So when we started in the 90s, it was all about communication. Then it went into commerce and selling. Then it went to social, and it went to then critical mission cloud-based technology with enterprise software. The reason I bring it up this way is I think that we need to think about AI as this continuous journey, and as a board, as we learn more, how do we evolve the metrics to say, okay, we've gotten the communication engagement part now. How do we leverage it so we can really solve tough problems inside the organization? And I think a lot of those metrics are going to evolve over time. It's just important to really tie these initiatives in AI with business goals and measurable outcomes.
Yeah, such great input. I want to spin off of something that you just said. You talked about all sorts of concerns, including biases. We can't think about AI, particularly generative AI, without being concerned about the ethical implications here. And Kumar, I want to turn back to you to talk about some of these ethical implications. Like this is very much the high level stuff that boards need to be concerned with, because we know the management team, we know the employment, the main workforce is going to be focused on the tactical implementation of things. And part of our role is to think about the big picture ethical implications, societal issues, but even just the broader ethical concerns. What can you share about the ethical implications of generative AI from the board level?
A great question, Patrick. So I think it's generative AI is not merely an instrument used to solve new problems, new complex problems, but in my view, it's a powerful tool that enhances human capabilities. So therefore, it is important to consider its accuracy and ensure adherence to established policies that can only happen with human intervention. So it's a tool to improve the way we work compared to replace what we do in some situations. Maybe it's possible, but some of the ethical implications that boards are currently thinking about as this technology is evolving, it's going to become more and more mature. It's maturing at an exponential pace. The first and foremost is job displacement. So I think organizations are concerned about the impact it will have on its people. Of course, there will be productivity gains, but also they're equally concerned about what are they going to do with those people who are being impacted by this. Privacy is a huge concern that boards are focusing on. Bias and misinformation, there are many examples already emerging based on what we are seeing in the last 2 years or so, where organizations or their employees are submitting reports and other things that have got bias and misinformation, and then the clients are finding those out, and of course hallucination of data. So those are all the issues that that boards need to focus on. Now, the role of the board in this kind of a situation is to have the right kind of deployment and governance framework so that there is a level of transparency and interpretability. So interpretation of whatever is being provided to a range of stakeholders. It needs to be fair. It needs to be relatively unbiased. There are privacy and data protection considerations that need to be met. And there needs to be clear accountability and liability in these kind of. So these are the questions that boards need to ask and create responsible AI a framework. Again, we are very much in early days of some of these things, and work is happening as you go. So there are two things. One is the strategy side. You use AI for, increasing innovation, driving strategy and productivity. On the other side, you also ensure while you're using it responsibility and protecting the organization, because the risks become quite significant as you start increasingly more and more use of it.
Yeah, thank you. That's just fantastic guidance. In a few minutes, we're going to open it up for audience questions. I invite you all to just drop your questions for our panel into the chat. And while you're doing that, I've got a couple additional comments and questions here. I think it's so important what Kumar just said about we all understand that the board has a critical role in risk management for the company, and having some governance and risk management framework in place is critically important for us to fulfill that responsibility. And I love how you broke down these risks. I think our panelists at least tend to be AI optimists. You know, I've heard it said that AI won't replace humans, but humans who use AI will replace humans who don't use AI. And I think that's true at kind of the broad strategic level, but honestly, at the individual micro level, I think we have to acknowledge that there will be those individuals who are displaced from their jobs. And we have to think about that, Kumar. I love that you raised that important issue for us from the ethical perspective. We have to come up with a way to think about job training, retraining, upskilling of our workforce, not only for our company to survive and leverage that talent that's going to be shifted from one job to another, but as a society, I think we have an important obligation there. So with that, I want to see any comments now. I'm going to give everyone an opportunity, everyone on the panel, to provide some closing comments when we're done with questions. But I want to see if we have any questions from our audience members. So I'm going to read down through some of our chats and see what we have. How we touched upon this a bit. A question here from Skip about how are boards addressing the negative aspects of AI, security concerns, misuse, deep fakes, etc. I think this is a particularly important question as we're heading into an election year. The thought of deep fakes does terrify me. Any thoughts from our board on Skip's question?
Well, I can start. I think first, you know, we need to be vigilant on a lot of this stuff. The same way we are starting to, I think organizations need to think about AI like they think about sometimes with cybersecurity in terms of having the right framework. I think NIST has created actually a pretty good AI framework about managing that risk. I think they talk about it in terms of 3 areas, which is AI. One is harm to people. If AI is actually harming people, harm to organizations, and harm to ecosystems. And then among that, the core function of their risk framework is really around mapping these risks, measuring and assessing it, and then managing it, as well as creating this governance around it. For those of you who have not spent any time looking at it, I would encourage you to really go to the NIST site and look at what they've created in terms of their AI framework. I think it's a pretty good place to start, at least.
I have another question here from Teresa about what AI policies are boards reviewing that corporations are implementing, particularly with regard to data use to ensure privacy. Any thoughts on privacy issues out there? I've got a couple of thoughts on this I'll share. I see privacy often coming down to 3 different buckets. We have our customer privacy that we're concerned with, often governed by the contract with our customers. Then we also third-party data. This is particularly important in the healthcare, life sciences field where you're dealing with health data that is particularly sensitive, but also with other data, credit card or other sensitive private data. But the area that I think applies to everyone here is employee data. I know a lot of companies, particularly since the pandemic kicked in, are using the employee productivity tools, measuring their productivity, counting the number of emails, keystrokes, time on keyboard, etc. And you see that this has to be balanced with the privacy concerns out there to keep faith with the workforce. So that's just one area, Teresa, that I've seen this at. Another question here: how are directors with tech background keeping up with AI savviness to remain effective? This is a great question for all of you. You're among the most tech-savvy board members in the nation.
Yes, I will go with that. I mean, I've been in the industry, technology industry, for almost 30 years, and digital for about 15 years. Every year, in fact, every week is a different week. and there is so much happening. So I would like to say it's sometimes impossible to understand everything that is emerging right now, but always useful to be connected in forums like this to learn as we go. And someone said to me the other day, we are in Silicon Valley. We are at the forefront of advancement. We know everything about AI. And I disagreed with them because AI evolution is not just in the Silicon Valley. It's happening all around the world at an exponential pace. And I think we just need to keep our antennas high and learn as much as we can.
I think for me, what I would say that I try to simplify it and create it into like different areas that we should all learn about. And if you think about how AI works, there's really three ingredients on that. One is your compute power, and the second one is algorithms, and then the third is a data piece. If you frame it kind of that way, it makes learning a little easier because you can put the learnings in the buckets. And right now, the biggest changes that are coming up in the future will be about this larger context window when you use AI. How much information is it going to have in context? Second area is the idea of agents and using where AI can correct their own work, working together to not just answer a question, but really to complete a whole task from beginning to end. And then the last thing is text to action. Those are really the three areas that I see as key areas to kind of focus on. So if you think about the framework of compute, algorithms, and data, and then how it translates to how this stuff evolves, it might make things, at least for me, it makes things a little easier to follow.
Great.
Really quickly, it's tactical, but I think Coursera, universities like Stanford continuing studies make easily available and accessible to anyone to learn these. So, I mean, especially if you're not in an operational role and learning kind of on the job on a daily basis, it can be overwhelming. But I think there's some great resources out there in addition to something like this, NACD panel.
Yeah, that's a great lead into a question from Julie here. You three are not representative of the typical board members' familiarity with AI. You are exceptional. But Julie's question is, what percentage of most boards have used AI with some regularity and on a daily basis and are good at it? And do they really know what they're governing out there? Like what percentage of boards really need some increased experience? Honestly, think our audience here is also not representative of this problem. I'm concerned about the board members who are not on this call, but just what's your estimate of how savvy boards are when it comes to AI, and is there a gap that needs to be closed?
I think the curiosity level is really high. I think the intimidation factor in terms of not understanding what to ask for is probably just as high. The most important thing maybe, and I would advocate for boards, is to really go through the education process. It's not just one certification, let's just say, but it is a series of continuous learning. Find people inside your organization that understands this, and maybe as a board member, have them come into the board meeting and continuously really educate the board on this stuff. So at least the board's equipped in terms of asking the right questions.
Yeah, and that'll just commend everyone in our audience for being here to close that knowledge gap. It's a great initiative. That leads to another question here in the chat from Bob, which raises another one of these risk management issues. It's about cyber attacks. I think we all acknowledge that as we're leveraging generative AI, it increases our cyber risks, our cyber vulnerabilities out there. What can board members do to acknowledge these risks and protect their organizations from cyber risks that grow with our AI use?
Go ahead.
Caroline, please. Caroline, please.
There is a reliance on a lot of industry-leading tools, right, to mitigate the risk. And you would assume that these companies are staying on top of the latest developments with respect to technology, including AI, to be able to catch for these types of things. But things certainly fall through the cracks. I think one thing that's important that we might not have touched on here, but when it comes to deep fakes or phishing, for example, is still a concern, right? A lot of the employees inside of the organization, in privacy in terms of how you're using Gen AI and the types of data that can or shouldn't be shared. There's something in the way of employee ethics and policy training that I think really needs to be updated and evolved to be able to address these types of risks. And I think that's important to ensure that the company has in place and that knowledge is refreshed on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I'll add that part of the irony is that AI is powering some of these cyber threats. It's making the cyber threats so much more powerful, but only AI can help counter those threats at the speed that we need to in order to generate, implement, and put in fixes at the same pace that the threats are evolving. So it's kind of a cat and mouse game, all powered by generative AI. It's pretty interesting to see it play out there. A question from Adnan about what should board members, this is focused on the audit committee, what should board members expect of chief auditors in providing assurance on the use of AI at the companies? Any leading practices or examples you could have from the audit perspective that we can share?
I think data governance is very auditable, and having the right policies, making sure that the data is collected in the appropriate manner and stored, all those are very much auditable practices. And I think the data governance processes will further evolve to be audited, because that is the foundation of any AI engine. So I do feel that auditors need to think about how to evolve auditability of the data governance frameworks, and I do feel that in the years to come, there will be certifications of data governance like we have seen in many other areas.
Okay, I've got one last question here from a global firm board's perspective with government partnerships out there. Evolving landscape, what metrics, that if there are any that we haven't already discussed, would you recommend for the board to engage the ecosystem that we have to contend with out there from the board's perspective? Any other thoughts from a regulatory or governance perspective? Okay.
I think maybe one area that has not been talked about enough, and I think governments are going to start paying attention to this, is the amount of synthetic data that actually is being used in simulations and how companies are using it. We talked about first-party data. That's all the data that an organization has. To give you an example of the scale of synthetic data, and for those that don't know what it is, synthetic data is data that's artificially generated that mimics real-world data. And the reason it's important is that you actually need to use it to deliver and get more accurate answers. As an example, Waymo, as an example, they've test drove about 20 million miles on public roads. You can see this on their website. But in terms of using synthetic data for training and simulation, they've used 20 billion miles. So that's on a scale of a 10x of data. And then I think over time, as government gets smarter on it, they're going to want to make sure that there's going to be ethical use of this synthetic data, that we're going to have to put some frameworks around it just to make sure there's no biases in that, because again, they're using data that's been mimicked or artificially created based on the data they already understand.
You know, that reminds me, Anthony, of a recent visit I had to the NVIDIA headquarters. They are creating a digital twin of the entire world for modeling for global climate change, and see what they can do in that front. Talk about the potential uses. I mean, there's no other way to really figure out the impact without having a digital twin. You don't want to wait for the actual Earth to experience it. You want to figure this out in a manner like that. Great example of how boards can help model and shape their strategies out there. I'm going to let you each close it out with a tip. I will start with a tip or a thought or a board question that can be asked of management, whatever you want to share with the audience to close this out. My number one tip that I always share with folks about technological innovation and leveraging AI is the concept of human-machine teaming. It's not either or. There are things that humans do better: empathy, judgment, common sense, leadership. but we have to acknowledge that there are things that machines do better than we do. Rapid data computations, ingesting mass amounts of information, boring, repetitive tasks where I would just stop paying attention. And the secret to success here is to combine humans and machines in ways that leverage the respective strengths of each. So again, it's not an either or decision here. So with that, I want to turn it over to each of you, starting with you, Anthony, for a final thought for our audience.
Yeah, I would say, when you think about what's been created today, the thing we've not talked about is the untapped potential of AI is really based on what the data that's fed into the algorithms and the compute power to make it work. And right now, about 80 to 90% of the world's most valuable data is actually behind corporate firewalls. So to give you some sense of scale, ChatGPT 4.0 was trained on the entire internet. And when they did that, I think they scraped about a little less than 1 petabyte of the open internet data to feed that. JP Morgan by themselves, their internal data set has been estimated to be roughly about 15 petabytes. So more than 15x bigger than the entire internet, which then leads the question. Right now, I think organizations really need to think about the problems that they couldn't solve before and revisiting what they thought were merely impossible to do now might be possible, but just hard to do with AI. And, it's a good discussion point probably for boards to have with their leadership team and their CEOs by revisiting the impossible to see what is possible.
Thank you, Anthony. Caroline, final thoughts from you.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think there's a great article to check out, but by my good friend and colleague Vivek Sharma, who is on the boards of JetBlue and Kaiser. He wrote an HBR article recently, 6 Ways AI Could Disrupt Your Business. And I just want to call out the topic of obsolescence. I think there's a very thought-provoking question there, which is whether AI can make your company's core products and offerings obsolete. That's something I think to take away.
That is a scary takeaway, but I think super important. Kumar, over to you.
Thank you, Patrick. I have no doubt in my mind that generative AI is going to be an enabler of innovation in many organizations. It can enable change for better, but the organization culture needs to be ready for it. So the board directors and the executive need to make sure that the cultural transformation is working at a parallel pace to what is needed. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do. So I think any organization's success going forward will be based on how quickly they can change from a culture perspective, get aligned to what is available and leverage this a fantastic technology which is evolving as we speak. So I'm very optimistic and huge opportunities ahead, Patrick.
Thank you so much, Kumar. I just want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us today. I particularly want to thank these 3 panelists for sharing their time and thoughts. Amazing group. Kumar, in particular, I want to thank you and GHD Digital for sponsoring this event. And finally, I want to thank our incredible team at the NorCal chapter, Lisa Spivey, Kate Asma, for your hosting this on our behalf.